John, I appreciate your help also in being organized and getting here. And also, Chris and Chelsea, thank you so much for having me back. I really enjoyed being with you guys last year and presenting. Um, the premise I have is a relatively simple one, and if we think about Logictry and how do we make better logical decisions, it's really derived from an earlier treatise by Adam Smith, whose seminal work on capitalism, not Wealth of Nations, but his prior one, Theory of Moral Sentiments, was, and I paraphrase, that capital is a force for activating and distributing diverse innovations, which allow wealth to be created across the board for everyone, as opposed to, I think, the modern interpretations and what we see today is a lot of consolidation of wealth in very few hands. So I believe strongly in this notion of capitalism, free markets as existing primarily because of Adam Smith's earlier conceits about creating gains for others. And if we think about societal impacts, the positive ones at least, because there's negative ones, the clarity that I have from an operational viewpoint is really a question of who gains and what do they gain. And that for me is the best sort of litmus test of a societal innovation, not an impact, not is it novel or new or unique, but does it outperform the current status quo? So regardless of whether I'm on Wall Street or on Main Street or whatever industry I'm in or whatever SDG flag I'm flying, the opportunities I believe are available for all of us to think of this sort of theoretical logic decision of who gains the most and put that into an operational framework. So my expectation and hope for you guys, and my target for you is for you guys to gain a framework and a tool that will help you take this theory and apply it in your work and hopefully achieve greater performance than your status quo results so far. So that being said, in terms of the gains for other people, and let me sort of bring this down into the framework of sort of family office portfolios and entrepreneurs and venture, because that's where I've been spending a lot of my time is early stage ventures as social innovators and entrepreneurs. In ventures, we oftentimes anticipate. Oh, and by the way, John, you can go ahead and release mutes. I'm happy for people to chime in. I don't think we have too many people here. So, and we'll find out who actually is here behind the mute button for people to ask questions. But in terms of working with venture, the challenge that folks will have is they'll come up with a great, brilliant idea or innovation on how to do something. And maybe it's an educational improvement program. Maybe it's SaaS software. It could be anything. And they'll become very sort of narrowly focused when they think about gains for others, perhaps on their initial customers, but eventually that'll drift into sort of a product-centric sort of growth paradigm and roadmap. And what I actually ask sort of my venture founders to do is to really take a step back from that very narrow focus and sort of rushing towards the horizon on building something and get it to market, and to think about the sort of, as Fred Rogers said at a keynote address at a social venture partnership conference that I attended, the myth of the self-made man is still persistent today. There are thousands of hands that have helped us along the way for every bit of our successes, but yet those hands oftentimes are overlooked, and rarely are they anticipated as part of the mix for ultimate success in any undertaking. So step back, I say to these founders, and I want you to consider who are the most essential allies beyond your paying customers that are necessary for your success. And if you can get to a level of clarity and identifying who those most ideal allies are, and then if you can take it to the next level of trying to understand what it is that you can help them achieve and gain under their own agency, which is table stakes, that is valuable to them, then you have a higher probability of success, commercial success, and every other type of success with that fairly well-defined and targeted expectation. So there are basically, from a venture standpoint, what I consider to be the 5 allies that every venture, whether or not they acknowledge it, ultimately depends upon for their success. And those 5 are investors, team, partners, paying customers, and supportive communities. And within those allies are what I would call the ideal ally that is unique and specifically focused on more than just financial terms on the success that you're hoping to achieve. So whether or not you're trying to improve, say, climate impacts or literacy rates or health and in poor and underserved communities, chances are there's a unique ideal ally for you in that undertaking. And if you can then consider what it is that that ideal ally would be motivated and want to gain from your success, you could start to articulate that and turn it into a very clear part of a comprehensive roadmap, as opposed to just building out a product with specific features and customer benefits. So there's a core practice that we work on that helps founders to do that and to sort of differentiate their capabilities for understanding where value creation occurs and how that can be helpful and accelerate success for their venture. And we call that practice the Future Annual Value Report. And what you simply do as a founder is you sit down and you think about those 5 allies, and you pick one of those audiences and you write down what gains would be most highly valued and desired by that ally a year from today, and only a year from today. And then you go through that practice for all 5 of the allies, and you keep refining that practice until it becomes clear. And what you've done essentially by the end of that practice is you refined an environment of success that everybody that is important and essential for your societal impact success can get on board with and join in. And every venture founder that does this practice ends up finding that what they projected to have accomplished in a year actually happens in less time, oftentimes in 6 months or less. And that is usually the result of practice clarity. And practice clarity, not in the sense of what's important only for me in my venture, but also what's important for the essential allies that our venture and these societal impacts need to both replicate and scale into the world. So that framework of doing a future annual value report can be applied into any social impact domain. It can be applied from any founder or project leader or government program or philanthropy. And if we flip it from the operator over to the investor side now, the people who would like to pursue and have good capital follow good results in growing and scaling societal impacts, we can look at this as a nice lens by which I would like to consider this part of the due diligence, where you're not trying to catch people doing things wrong, but trying to reveal and help them get to higher probabilities of doing things right. I see this as a very powerful lens for people who are looking to make investments to understand through the individual who will be receiving the money, whether or not they can comprehend the value that is necessary for them to create for all 5 of their allies. If a venture founder can only articulate 1 ally or 2, that might be okay, but certainly one that can articulate all 5 in reasonable fashion and doable with stretch in a year is going to have a higher probability of success in that year over the person who is ignorant or perhaps at best just pleasuring best efforts. So if you're a portfolio investor trying to pursue and grow societal impacts in any SDG or in any area, it makes good sense to help whoever your operators are, whoever you're betting on, to articulate what those gains are in a who and what format before you get to how. Who gains and what do they gain? And bring that bracketed down, not into a 3 or 5 year plan, but into a 1-year future forecast. And that helps everybody get to logic that is believable, credible, and also doable with a stretch. I find the 3 to 5 year plans just encourage everyone to lie creatively and elegantly. Whereas if you target something a year from today, I'll believe you. And from that perspective, you can then have more interesting discussions, especially if you have domain expertise on a portfolio side, of how to improve the allies that are showing up to be beneficial to the venture's progress and the societal impacts, and actually come to maybe even a more enhanced opportunity set that should be achievable within a year. Does anybody have any questions, remarks, thoughts, or ideas? And John, did you take everybody off mute? I see everybody on mute.
We give them the ability to unmute themselves. Yeah,
Okay.
not unmute everybody simultaneously.
Perfect, perfect. So now we can really tell who's here.
Or if they have questions, you know.
Yeah, questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. So the premise of societal impacts driving financial performance is derived from Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments and the use of capital, which is the more gain I can create for you, the more gain I can capture on my own balance sheet. Now, of course, that requires you to structure your operations and your engagements that way. When I was on Wall Street, where I first sort of vetted this idea and proved it in practice and doing offshore hedge funds, the idea was that, my profit sharing was only earned when my clients earned, the LPs. Temba, Motsi, please unmute.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm okay. What do you think about the concept of scarcity
The
as it
concept
applies to scarcity,
of scarcity. Yes, as it
scarcity
applies
mindset,
to.
as it applies to manage money and business connections, how they think about organizing and being part of a group in business, because I think people in certain situation, you find that the previously oppressed groups are unable to cooperate. And when they do, it doesn't last very long. And generally, the people in power, when they get maybe financial rewards from their actions, instead of sharing with the group or even leaving some of the money in the business so that it can regenerate, they take.
Oh, did we lose you? Did we lose Tembe?
Yeah, but if you wanted to take a stab at answering the question, we got a couple more in the popper for you.
Sure. So he asked about the what about scarcity in the application of, and he was breaking up. Did you catch him, John?
It was a question around scarcity mindset in group environments, where it seems like I think the question really was kind of a zero-sum game and what that might look like.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that certainly exists. So my question is of scarcity in group environments, you've got to figure out a way to flip the switch. And oftentimes that can be done. The perception that money is required to do everything is I find patently false, because money oftentimes is just simply a placeholder for other things to arrive. You raise money so that you can contract with people to do work. If you just got the people to do the work out, you wouldn't need to pay them the money. And you'll see that oftentimes in early stage ventures where people show up below or without any market rate whatsoever and do a heck of a lot of work for a future payoff. So if we think about in traditionally poor and underserved communities where there may be a more sort of a legacy, sort of scarcity mindset, the challenge there is to help the residents come together and conceive what is it that we want that we can collectively accomplish together that none of us can accomplish alone. And if we can help them to envision a gain of significance that all of them will share, then those natural alignments of focusing on that gain will happen and emerge organically and spontaneously and persist. The problem is that when a lot of outside interventionists come in, they'll have already prescribed what the gain is, and they won't necessarily prescribe it in a way or a framework that has to be skin in the game and utterly dependent upon the collective efforts of the community. Because if you can go ahead and accomplish the project without my input, then I'm redundant and you're just giving me lip service. But if we make it essential that the community themselves has to collectively act, then the scarcity mindset evaporates, because they start to then realize that we ourselves, with our own human material and even our very small affordability, can actually make a significant difference and accomplish and achieve something that all of us desire, but none of us can do alone. So that's the real challenge. And ladling in more traditional and orthodox methodologies about, talking them to death or trying to prescribe something that they themselves don't believe is dependent upon them, you're just not going to get it to the finish line. You may end up delivering something to them, but I don't think you'll either displace the scarcity mindset or activate them to achieve their fullest potentials, which are latent oftentimes in poor and rural communities in particularly, that could lead to very powerful and very positive change.
Thank you so much, Rob. Um, I put this in the comments. I find this very interesting. I'm learning a ton. So I have a handful of funds, and I work with a couple hundred other groups that we're trying to have be more impact focused, or at least focused on the greater good with their investments.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things which we really work on is finding those allies, advocates, and accomplices to help them get through their blind spots and also be their chief cheerleaders.
Yeah.
How would you recommend we push our founders to recognize those allies in all those ways?
That's a great insight and question, and I think it's a very easy get. I mean, literally, and I can send you a framework. Literally, ask them to write a future annual value report, and that is a show me where you are, not a here's how you failed practice. And the reason I call it a practice is because it's iterative. You can keep doing it and refining it because you will learn, and you're an emergent understanding and the logic of connecting, you know, individual allies within an alliance, say investors, you know, I don't need to go to look at institutional VCs. I should be looking at angels. You know, that sort of emergent understanding will evolve, and especially with your guidance and help, and if you have the domain expertise that's relevant for any ally set, you should share it immediately. And that cultivated awareness will then start to apply itself to very, very crystal clear recognition of resources in a mutual exchange. So I never want to engage anybody that is not going to, achieve something greater after they have met me than before. So I always want to be thinking about what's my target for them to get out of the relationship. And so if you create that thinking as a habit in founders, and you demystify this notion and you bring it down to who gains what, as opposed to really large concepts about impacts and categories and things like that, which are overwhelming, you just bring it down to a simple who investor is going to gain what. And oftentimes it's a non-financial gain. It's surprising how much 98% of what motivates people to do things in social and societal impacts is not financial, but they are gaining something. So, and that's a discovery process, a co-creative discovery process that I think is really fascinating and certainly, a way to build passion and enthusiasm for the work on the ground. So I think you could just pivot and take the conceptual framework of what I give you, and I'd be happy to share a guide and just start. And you'll be amazed about how people show up and the insights and the sort of collaborative co-creative process you guys get.
Thank you, finally.
Excellent. Rob, I have a question for you, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to capital and impact. What are some of the big misconceptions that you've seen, and what are you hoping to see change, and some of your own personal goals for 2025?
Yeah, well, I think, regardless of where we believe we are on our own continuum in terms of societal impacts, the overwhelming industry perspective is that social anything is concessionary on returns. You have a tough row to hoe to go in any orthodox investment firm or equity or portfolio manager and talk about social impacts, and all of a sudden in the back of their head, they're thinking concessionary. They just don't see how it could possibly compete. And part of that problem, Drucker expounded a lot about, innovation and entrepreneurship, but part of the problem is this: they don't really connect the dots right in front of their nose. Where do they think high performing money comes from in terms of financial investments and returns? It comes from other people. And what would persuade other people to give you money or resources or assets? It's certainly a vested gain in their own interest. So a vested gain in other people is, for lack of a better term, a societal impact. Now, if you want to generate societal impacts in disenfranchised, underserved, scarce financial markets and customer segments, that's fine. And that's not hard. That's the not-for-profit business model, which two of the most wealthiest companies in the world utilize, Google and Facebook. I provide our users a free service, and I get paid over here by my advertisers, which is no different than a not-for-profit or a social venture providing their educational users a free service and getting paid over here by advertisers or anybody else who wants to consume their big data. So the question that we have is really coming to clarity and bringing a product discipline to all the gain we want to co-create, that it has to consume capital and perform with it. And if we can do that, then it's easier for traditional and orthodox investors to understand what's driving the ROI. And then I think we can create broader bridges for more capital flow into societal impacts, because we're not selling loosey-goosey fuzziness. We're selling real hard gains for real tangible people in real customer segments. And that's going to be replicable and scalable, and it's going to accumulate, and you're going to see outperformance. Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia showed that discipline incredibly well, but with how they created gains for all their allies. I mean, from 1% of the planet to let my people go surfing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we can go back and look in the marketplace where significant companies have used in part or in whole this process of seeing capital as a strategic long-term investment that is higher performing in ROI, but the headwinds are still against us. We not only have the issue about overcoming the use of social, but we also have sort of somewhat of the short-term analyst and drag effect of Wall Street and most capitalists wanting that next quarter performance results to look better than the market beta. But I think we're winning slowly and surely, and I think there's enough of us crowded around the campfire to start to make significant impacts with what we already have.
I would love to hear your thoughts on the balance between family offices and family foundations when it comes to investments in areas where they see the benefit of the social good or the impact. And also I have many funds, and one of which is called an impact fund, which I would probably title differently in the future. But that is an area where we've been finding success, is aligning those two sides of the families, and didn't know how that's worked for you.
Yeah, I think that it's maturing fast, and I think it's more of a generational and cultural issue in that. I mean, there's a lot of old school trusted advisors that are, a multifamily or single family offices that have, to come along the learning curve. And also then when you look at the other side of the corpus, that is, not necessarily being used for program or for stretch types of exotic investments into social impact. You think that you could see that we've sort of emerged from a negative screen to more positive screens in sort of asset allocations. But, I think it's still very much idiosyncratic. I would love, I don't really have a finger on the pulse of how those dynamics are playing out right now, but I would love to see more examples where there's been a harmonization of vision and value creation, where both sides, the foundation side and the higher performing market portfolio side, are really looking at this as sort of a collaborative function. That would be very exciting. Have you seen anything like that emerging on your side, Will?
We have. There are a few funds projects which we have done that the next gens do not have the access to be able to make these big swings yet.
Right. Not yet.
And they're needed to build a track record. However, they're unable to build a track record when they are not able to participate. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing with Chelsea and some of our friends is showing ways where they can have early participation. And we have found success and results where there are those clear lines between what is the for-profit side, what's the nonprofit side. But often amongst the Thanksgiving dinner table, the conversations can come up and it can start to explain it. I agree with you, and it is definitely not easy to raise towards social programs.
Well, an exciting place that could get, so it depends upon how obviously the allocation and asset classes, but on the venture side of the for-profit portfolio, it makes absolute good sense for the foundation side to underwrite the risk of innovation, right? And that results in non-dilutive capital for founders who otherwise couldn't raise because they're just not, their ideation isn't mature or what have you, but they're willing to go in there and expend effort in hard-pressed and hard-fought areas that don't already have market solutions. So I think with the right framework, what you can see is the underwriting of amazing opportunities in key areas that depend upon innovation and venture on a non-dilutive sort of foundation side where they can get programmatic cover but with the longitudinal idea of looking at the for-profit side, picking up that piece when it does start to get traction. I don't know if you guys know Wesley King, but they have an amazing model where they're actually, it's a venture model, but rather than looking for IPOs and exits, Wesley is looking at both sides of the medical innovation, where he's got innovators coming in and they're pre-screened for acquisitions for large scale strategics. So in a way, they're playing both sides of the same coin. So I think exploring that type of relationship between the foundation side and the for-profit side could be very interesting and offer a lot of opportunities, especially if there's some thematic congruence in terms of what you guys are after.
Absolutely. And I can take it offline, but I'd love to give you a couple of examples and get your thoughts on how we can make that more.
Happy, happy to anytime.
You are appreciated.
Any other questions? If anybody would like a copy of the how to draft a future annual value report and sort of with some easy, quick steps, I'd be happy to send it out for free. It's, you know, let's all make things work. So please hit me up. And if anybody has any follow-on questions or thoughts that arise after this that you want to ping me with, I'm certainly happy to have a chat with you. I have an open 30-minute Calendly that anybody can schedule me on as well.